Helmand Province, Afghanistan, October 15, 2009, 0430 hours. American Forward Operating Base, FOB Chapman, under siege from three sides. 72 hours of non-stop enemy fire. 15 American soldiers trapped, ammunition critically low, air support grounded. Due to heavy fog, last radio message from command. Hold your position. Help is on the way. But help wouldn't arrive for 48 hours. Could they survive that long? The highest AB-7, the highest observation post of the base, stands a woman. Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez, 28 years old. Born in Texas. Barrett M82 sniper rifle in her hands. Cold determination in her eyes. Enemy fire from 347 meters out, picking off her brothers one by one. Elena's first target, enemy commander, 380 meters out. Wind speed 15 knots left to right. One breath, one shot, target neutralized. But this was just the beginning point. 72 hours later, Elena Rodriguez would have saved 15 soldiers' lives, confirmed 23 enemy kills, and despite taking shrapnel to her left arm, never abandoned her position. That woman now sits in a small cafe on State Street in Chicago, quiet, ordinary, drawing no attention. And this morning, until young barista Mike notices that deep scar on her arm, nobody knows that Elena Rodriguez is a living legend. ... Welcome to Human Stories. Before we continue with this powerful tale of hidden heroism and the price of service, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, hit that subscribe button. The Morning Grind Cafe had been Elena Rodriguez's daily ritual for exactly 8 months and 12 days. Not that she kept track obsessively old habits. From military precision just made her brain automatically log details that most people would never notice. Every morning at 9:30 a.m., sharp, she pushed through the glass door with its cheerful good morning. Dekel nodded to whoever was behind the counter and walked directly to table 7, the corner spot by the large window that offered clear sightlines to both the entrance and the emergency exit in the back. She always ordered the same thing: black coffee, no sugar, no cream, and one plain bagel, lightly toasted. She'd sit with her back to the wall, newspaper spread in front of her, but eyes constantly moving, cataloging the other customers, the staff, anyone who came or went, to the regular morning crowd, the business people rushing through for their caffeine fix, the college students camping out with laptops, the retirees who treated the cafe like their personal social club. Elena was just another middle-aged woman marking time. Quiet, polite, forgettable. They didn't notice the way she positioned herself to maintain maximum situational awareness. They didn't see how her eyes automatically assessed every person who entered, categorizing threat levels based on body language, hand positions, concealed carry possibilities. They certainly didn't recognize the subtle signs of someone who'd spent years scanning horizons for muzzle, flashes and movement in places where a moment's inattention could mean death. Elena Rodriguez looked exactly like what she'd worked hard to become since leaving the army 5 years ago: invisible. Mike Chen had been working at Morning Grind for 2 years, putting himself through community college with dreams of transferring to a 4-year school for criminal justice. At 22, he was observant enough to notice patterns in the regular customers, but young enough to still be curious about the stories behind the faces. The woman at table 7 intrigued him. She was always polite, but never chatty. She read the newspaper cover to cover, but never seemed to actually be reading. She sat perfectly still, but somehow gave the impression of coiled energy, like she was ready to move at a second's notice. And there was something about her eyes. They were kind eyes, patient eyes, but they held a weight that seemed too heavy for someone who appeared to live such a quiet, routine life. That Tuesday morning started like dozens of others. Elena arrived at exactly 9:30, ordered her usual black coffee and plain bagel, and settled into her corner table with the Chicago Tribune. Mike was working the counter solo. His coworker had called in sick, so the morning rush kept him busy until around 10:15. When the rush died down, Mike noticed Elena struggling slightly with her newspaper. She was trying to turn the page with just her right hand while keeping her left arm close to her body. It's a subtle but clearly practiced adaptation that suggested chronic pain or limited mobility. As he refilled her coffee cup, something he'd done hundreds of times before, Mike caught sight of something he'd never noticed. Elena's long-sleeved shirt had ridden up slightly on her left arm, revealing a deep, jagged scar that ran from just above her wrist toward her elbow. It wasn't a surgical scar or an accident mark. It looked like shrapnel damage, the kind of wound that comes from explosive fragments tearing through flesh. "Ma'am," Mike said quietly, setting down the coffee pot. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but that's quite a scar. Were you in an accident?" Elena looked up from her newspaper, meeting Mike's eyes, directly for what might have been the first time. In 8 months of interactions, for a moment she seemed to be weighing whether to deflect the question with a polite non-answer. The way she probably had dozens of times before. Instead, she carefully folded her newspaper and looked down at her arm, where the scar was still partially visible. "Not an accident," she said quietly. "Afghanistan, long time ago." Mike felt his assumptions about the quiet woman at table 7 shift dramatically. "You served?" Elena nodded once. "Army? 5 tours? Infantry?" Mike asked, though even as he said it, he realized it was probably the wrong question. Women hadn't served in official infantry roles during most of the Afghanistan conflict. Elena's mouth curved in the slightest, smiled the first time Mike had ever seen her show any real expression. "Sniper," she said simply. The word hung in the air between them like a revelation. Mike tried to process this information while looking at the unassuming woman in front of him. She was maybe 5'6", average build, graying brown hair pulled back. In a simple ponytail, she looked like someone's aunt, not a trained military marksman. "A sniper," Mike repeated, not quite believing it. "Like, for real?" Elena's expression grew more serious. "Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez, 1st Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, deployed 2006 to 2011. Mike knew enough about military structure to understand that the Rangers weren't just any unit, they were elite. And he knew enough about recent history to understand that 2006 to 2011 covered some of the most intense fighting in Afghanistan. "Wow," he said, clearly struggling to reconcile this information with the quiet woman who'd been coming in for months. "That must have been... intense." Elena was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at the busy Chicago street. "Some days more than others? Asterisk is that where... Mike gestured toward her arm. "Among other places." Elena's voice carried a weight that suggested the visible scar was just one of many. Not all of them physical. Mike wanted to ask more questions, what it was like, what she'd seen, what she'd done. But something in Elena's posture warned him that this wasn't casual conversation territory. This was information she'd shared reluctantly. And pushing for details would probably end the conversation entirely. But his curiosity had been sparked, and Elena seemed to sense it. "You want to know about the scar?" she said. It wasn't a question. Mike nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Elena was quiet for another long moment, then seemed to make a decision. "October 2009, FOB Chapman, Helmand Province. We were under siege for 3 days. I was in an observation tower, providing overwatch for the guys on the ground." She paused, her fingers unconsciously tracing the edge of the scar through her shirt sleeve. "On the 3rd day, they got a mortar round close enough to the tower to send shrapnel through the reinforced windows. Caught me in the arm, but I couldn't leave my position. The guys down there were depending on me to keep the enemy at distance." Mike found himself leaning forward, completely absorbed. "How long did you stay?" "Until the siege broke." "Another 18 hours after I got hit." Elena's voice was matter-of-fact, like she was describing a particularly difficult day at the office. Rather than an act of extraordinary courage under fire, 18 hours. "With that wound?" Elena shrugged. "Field dressing and adrenaline can get you through a lot. Besides, it wasn't about me. I had 15 guys on the ground who needed me to do my job. Did you... Did you have to?" Mike struggled with how to ask the question. "Did I have to shoot people?" Elena finished for him. "Yes, that was my job. I was good at it." Her tone was neither proud nor ashamed, just stating a fact. "How good?" Mike asked quietly. Elena met his eyes again, and for a moment Mike saw something that made him understand why enemies might have feared this unassuming woman. Good enough to bring all 15 of my guys home alive? Now the conversation might have ended there, but Elena surprised Mike by continuing. You know what the hardest part? Was not the shooting, not the blood or the fear, or even getting wounded. It was coming home and trying to figure out how to be normal again. How to sit in places like this without constantly checking exits and sightlines. How to trust that the world is safe when you've seen how quickly everything can go wrong. Mike looked around the cafe, seeing it through new eyes. Elena's corner table, her positioning, the way she watched everyone who came and went, it all made sense now. Is that why you sit here every day? To practice being normal? Elena actually smiled at that. A real smile this time. Smart kid. Yeah, I guess that's part of it. Routine helps. Predictable environments help. In this place, she gestured around the peaceful cafe. It reminds me what I was fighting to. Protect. Their conversation was interrupted by a new customer entering the cafe, a man in his 50s wearing a baseball cap with military insignia. Elena's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, her attention focusing on the newcomer with laser intensity. The man approached the counter, and Mike could see him taking in Elena's appearance. When he noticed her sitting at the corner table, his expression changed to one of recognition. "Excuse me," the man said, walking over to Elena's table. "Are you Elena Rodriguez?" Elena's guard went up immediately. Depends who's asking.
I, the man,
removed his cap, revealing graying hair and a weathered face marked by years in the sun. Master Sergeant Rick Torres, 3rd Battalion, 75th Rangers. I served with your unit in 09 and 10. Elena's expression shifted from wariness to cautious recognition. Torres, you were with Bravo Company. That's right, ma'am. I just wanted to say... Torres paused, clearly emotional. My nephew was one. Of the guys you covered at Chapman, Danny Morrison, made it home because of what you did up in that tower. Elena's composure cracked slightly. Danny Morrison, good kid. How's he doing? Married now, 2 kids. He's a firefighter in Denver, and he names you in his prayers every night, ma'am. His whole family does. Mike watched this exchange from behind the counter, beginning to understand that whatever Elena had done in Afghanistan, it was more significant than she'd let on. Ma'am, Torres continued, I don't know if you know this, but what you did at Chapman became legend in the Rangers. They still tell the story to new recruits. The female sniper who held a tower for 3 days and saved an entire squad. Elena shifted uncomfortably. I just did my job, Torres. No, ma'am, with respect, you did a lot more than that. You took 23 confirmed kills over 72 hours, stayed at your post despite taking shrapnel, and provided covering fire that allowed medical evacuation of 4 wounded soldiers. That's not just doing your job, that's being a hero. Felt his understanding of Elena Rodriguez shift again. He'd thought she was impressive when she mentioned being a sniper. Now he was learning she was something approaching legendary. Torres, Elena said quietly, I appreciate what you're saying, but I don't talk about those days much. I understand. Ma'am, I just... When I saw you sitting here, I had to say thank you. From Danny, from his family, from all of us who made it home because of soldiers like you. Torres put his cap back on and gave Elena a small salute before walking back to the counter to place his order. Elena sat quietly, clearly processing the unexpected encounter. Mike approached her table with a fresh cup of coffee. Even though her current cup was still half full. 23 confirmed kills in 3 days? He asked quietly. Elena looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd known her, she looked tired. Not physically tired, but soul-deep weary in the way that only comes from carrying heavy memories. For years, you have to understand, she said, those weren't just numbers on a scorecard. Every one of those shots meant one of my guys got to keep breathing. When you're looking through a scope at someone who's trying to kill your brothers, the math becomes very simple. I can't imagine the pressure. The pressure wasn't the problem. I was trained for that. The problem was afterward, when I had time to think about it, when I had to figure out how to live with what I'd done, even though I knew it was necessary. Elena was quiet for a moment, then continued. People think coming home from war is about celebrating survival, but sometimes it's about learning to live with the person you had to become over there. Mike wanted to say something comforting, something meaningful.
Ow.
But he was 22 years old and had never faced anything more challenging than a difficult customer. What could he possibly say to someone who'd experienced what Elena had been through? For what it's worth, he said finally, I think you're doing okay. I mean, you seem like a good person. It's kind of quiet, but good. Elena's smile returned, smaller but genuine. Thanks, Mike. That means more than you might think. Their conversation was interrupted again, this time by Elena's phone buzzing with a text message. She glanced at it and immediately stood up. Hey, have to go? She said, gathering her newspaper and purse. My nephew's school called. He's sick and needs to be picked up. As she prepared to leave, Mike realized he had one more question. Elena, ... Why did you tell me? About Afghanistan, I mean. Could have just said it was an old injury. Elena paused at his question, considering her answer carefully. Because, she said finally, for 8 months you've treated me like a normal person, not like a hero, not like a victim, not like a curiosity, just like Elena, the woman who drinks black coffee and reads the newspaper. And sometimes, that's the most important thing someone can do for a veteran. Let them be normal. Started toward the door, then turned back. But Mike, if you ever want to talk about service, or what it means to protect people, I'm here every morning at 9:30. The stories aren't always easy. Sometimes they need to be told. Elena left the cafe, and Mike stood behind the counter processing everything he'd learned. The quiet woman at table 7 wasn't just a veteran. She was a decorated war hero who'd saved 15 lives and was now trying to figure out how to live a peaceful civilian life in Chicago. Asterisk, but more than that, when she was someone who'd trusted him with her story. Hood opened up about the most defining experience of her life to a 22-year-old barista she barely knew. The next morning, Elena arrived at exactly 9:30, just like always. She ordered her black coffee and plain bagel, settled into table 7 with her newspaper, and gave Mike a small nod of acknowledgement. But something had changed. Mike no longer saw her as the mysterious, quiet woman in the corner. He saw her as Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez, a soldier who'd faced down enemies for 72 hours straight and saved 15 lives, and who now chose to spend her mornings in a peaceful cafe, slowly learning to trust the world again. When he brought her coffee refill that morning, Mike said quietly, Thank you for sharing your story yesterday. Elena looked up from her newspaper. Thank you for listening. I've been thinking about what you said about wanting to go into criminal justice, about protecting people. It's good work, Elena said. Hard sometimes, but good. Do you think? Mike hesitated, then forged ahead. Do you think you could tell me more about it sometime? About what it really means to serve? Elena studied his face for a moment, then nodded slowly. I think I'd like that. From that day forward, Elena's corner table became less of a hiding place and more of a teaching space. Not every day. Some mornings she still preferred the comfortable silence of routine, but gradually, Mike learned about service, sacrifice, and the weight of carrying responsibility for other people's lives. He learned that heroism isn't always loud and obvious. Sometimes it's quiet and persistent, like showing up every day to do a difficult job. Sometimes it's trusting a young stranger with stories that hurt to tell. Sometimes it's choosing to believe that the world is worth protecting, even after you've seen how dark it can get. And Elena learned that part of healing isn't just about finding peace with your past. It's about finding purpose in your present. That the skills and experiences that once kept soldiers alive in Afghanistan could also guide a young man toward a life of service at home. 3 months later, when Mike was accepted to the police academy, Elena was the first person he told. And when he graduated 18 months after that, she was sitting in the audience, proud of the role she'd played in shaping another protector. The woman at table 7 had found her mission again. It's not in a tower overlooking a battlefield, but in a corner of a Chicago cafe, quietly mentoring the next generation of people who choose to stand between danger and the innocent. Some heroes retire with fanfare and recognition. Others blend into civilian life, carrying their stories silently, sharing them only when someone shows they're ready to understand what service really means. Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez chose the second path, and in doing so, she discovered that the mission never really ends. It just changes form. Every morning at 9:30, she still sits at table 7. But now, instead of just surviving each day, She's helping others understand what it means to live with purpose. Because the best way to honor the soldiers who didn't make it home isn't always to talk about the past. Sometimes it's to quietly shape the future, one conversation at a time.